Hi everybody, welcome to Bob's O-Gauge Trains. Today's video is going to be the second video that I'm going to concentrate on how to do various things on your layout. The first one I did a little bit of scenery, how to show you how to lay some track on cork road bed. I did some ballasting and we added some grass and trees and some decorations here and there. And believe it or not, that was on the back of 2 ceiling tiles. I thought I had a piece of plywood, but I grabbed 2 old ceiling tiles, taped them together for a base, and that's what we put it on. And when it was all done, you would never know. But today we're going to do homemade coal loads. Now, every train manufacturer, in most of their hoppers, they do put some form of a coal load in the top, and they don't look very realistic. They look very toy-like. So, you know, if you're looking to do something a little bit better and make your own coal loads and add a personal touch to your train and your layout, in this video we're going to show you how to take nothing more than a 1-inch piece of foam and turn it into this, which is a coal load that you just simply plop in the top of your hopper, just like anything else. And it looks much more realistic. It looks, you know, very true to scale. So to me, it's a lot better. And every single one of my hoppers has them in them. I removed the old ones. Like I said, they just don't look very realistic. So I'm going to show you how to make these. So sit back and enjoy as we go step by step on how to make your own coal loads. Now you can make coal loads, ballast loads, loads for ore cars. You can make them really whatever you want. They don't have to be strictly coal. But I'm going to show you the basic way on how to make them, and how you decorate them or what you put in the back of the hopper is up to you. It's your railroad and your train. So I hope you enjoy as we go through a homemade version on how to make coal loads. Okay, so here we go. We start off with our foam. Like I said, this is 1 inch thick, and you don't have to buy a big roll. You could buy just a couple feet. I get a big roll because I buy it from the distributor, not a local hobby store, and it's cheaper. But you know, if you're making a couple coal loads, you don't have to get a lot of it. Or you know, you could buy a whole roll. It's not like it spoils. And like I said, it's 1 inch thick foam. It's like foam padding. And from there, what you do is you have to measure the inside dimensions of your hopper. In this case, we're doing the MTH Premier 4-bay hopper, which is this here. You can't measure the outside of your hopper because that's not what's going to fit inside. You have to measure the inside dimensions of the hopper. So in this case, we measure 11 3/4 long and 2 1/4 wide. Okay, so that's 2 1/4 wide, 11 3/4 long. And all I do is I just use the trusty yardstick, and just the old-fashioned way, use the yardstick and draw out your measurements. And all you have to do is mark it with a pen as to where you're going to cut. I've already pre-done that on the loads we're going to make. So it's going to look something like this. Each one of these is going to be a coal load. And of course, at the end, we only have like 1 inch. That's going to end up being scrap. But you cut out your markings as to where you're going to cut. Now, I'm going to take this outside. And I have a bandsaw that I can cut them pretty quick with. If you don't have a bandsaw, you can use any number of things. If you have a really good pair of scissors and a steady hand, or likewise with a hobby knife, whatever you can use to cut, but you want to try and make sure that when you do cut it, you're kind of staying real close to the line here. because you don't want to be all zigzag, because when you go to put it in a hopper, it's not going to fit or look right. So you got to try, when that's the object of drawing the lines on there, so you know where to cut. You got to try and cut as close to the center of that line as possible. Okay, so here we are with the next step. We have all of our foam cut. As you can see, I use a bandsaw. If you don't have one, and not everybody does, I understand that. If you have a real good pair of scissors and you have a steady hand, if you have a good hobby knife, however you think you can cut, this is very soft. This is like almost upholstery foam. Whatever you can use to cut a pretty straight line works just fine. And this is what they all look like when they're all cut. Now, because the foam was rolled up, you can't just lay it. I have a big piece, so I keep it rolled up. When you cut it, as you see here, it has a little bow because, you know, of it being rolled up. What you need to do to fix that before you go any further is just bend it the opposite way and just give it a little squeeze, hold it for a couple seconds. You know, it's kind of like if you have a rolled up poster, you roll it the other way to make it straight. So, you know, you need it straight like this, laying flat. Otherwise, when you glue a stick, I'm going to show you this here, it's not going to stick to this because one end is going to be sticking up. So just play with it a little bit, just bend it here and there, squish it, whatever you need to do in order to make a nice straight piece of foam. Then after that, you could use whatever you want. Sometimes I use a sheet of very, very thin, like 2 foot by 4 foot, extremely thin paneling. You could use anything. I mean, quite honestly, the simplest thing, these are nothing more than paint stirrers. You can get this at any Home Depot or Lowe's, and probably hobby shops or craft stores. They sell like popsicle sticks. You could use that too. Now, what you want to do is you want to glue. I use spray adhesive. You can use other types of glue. Super glue I would not recommend. White glue I would not recommend because the white glue simply takes too long to adhere, and you don't want to come back 2 hours later to find out that, you know, it's kind of sticking up like this. Whereas spray adhesive, I use Loctite spray adhesive. You spray it on there, and a couple minutes later it's dry, and it's sitting real nice like that on the top of the foam. Now what you want to do is you want to bring the stick to about that far from the end. That way you don't want the stick to go all the way to the end, because I'll show you at the end where we have to trim a little bit here or there to make it fit and look nice. If you put your stick all the way to the end and you have to cut a little bit of that off, you're going to see the stick through the coal, and you don't want that. And this is meant to give a little support for the foam itself. I've actually done a couple of them, and this basically is what you want it to look like when it's done. You want to leave a little bit on each side, so if you do have to trim it, you don't want to trim it right at the edge. So you try to get about this far away. Now, since we have a big gap here, because this is an extremely long coal load, if you have a small one, you just cut the stick. I just kind of broke some of them in half, and all I'm going to do is glue it like that to the top of the other stick and the foam itself, so it's going to look about like that. That's about what you want to do, so you have some support, and the foam is somewhat rigid instead of flopping around, because after you pour the coal and you put it onto your tray where you're going to spray the glue, you don't want it flopping around because you're going to lose the coal and ruin the coal load. So you want it fairly rigid. It's going to give it a little extra support, and that's about what you want it to look like. On both ends you want to leave a little bit of a gap, Like I said, so when you do pour the coal, if you have to trim a little off the end because it may be an eighth or a 16th of an inch too long, you're not digging into the stick. So leave a little bit of gap at the end, but that's about what you want it to look like. Okay, now I've actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 7 on the tray here, and I've actually done the first 5 just to save a couple extra minutes because it does take a couple minutes, but it's no big deal. I have the sticks for the last 2, and as you see, I glued the broken piece, kind of snapped it in half just to fit properly. I've actually glued it together, and it's all ready, and I have the last 2 I'm going to show you how to do. Now, I use any kind of spray adhesive would work. I use Loctite. It just seems to work better for me. But you do what's best for you. If you have another product that you like better, go ahead and use it. Like I said, stay away from super glue or like Elmer's white glue. I mean, not that they're bad, but for this purpose, they're not really the best. Super glue is kind of iffy and maybe not as strong. And Elmer's glue, regular white glue, takes a while to dry. And if it dries and everything's not in the right position, you're going to have to redo it. Whereas this dries pretty quick. And if something isn't right, you could remove the stick with a little extra care so you don't rip the foam or anything, or make repairs or whatever. So this seems to work the best. Any type of spray adhesive. And what I recommend is the hand that you're going to hold this with, get a rubber glove. The cheap plastic like surgical gloves, because you're going to be holding it and you're going to be spraying towards your hand. Otherwise, your fingers are going to be loaded with this stuff, and it is not easy to get off. It is a real pain. So just get, you don't have to buy a box, get 1 or 2. Get the little elastic or whatever they are, like surgical gloves. You could get at any practically drugstore. You can get, like 5 or 6 pairs for maybe $1. So what I do, take your glue, make sure everything's all good. Okay, now you want to, when you spray the glue, the small stick is actually glued to the top of the stick, and the other side will be adhered to the foam. But the vast majority of the stick, which is the long one, this size, will be glued directly to the foam. So that's what you want to do, because that's going to create the most strength. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to flip it upside down, and you give it a really good spray of glue. Don't be cheap with the glue. I mean, you don't have to make a mess, but sometimes I go right down the middle of the foam just to get an extra support. And what you do is you just simply stick it on, hold it down for, I don't know, roughly a minute, 30 seconds, whatever you think is good, just for it to get a good feel, because this stuff actually does dry pretty quick. And that's the purpose. You don't want to be standing here holding 1 coal load for an hour. So you just kind of use this and just hold it down, and it'll stick and dry very quickly onto your coal load. So we have 7 of the 8 done, or whatever, 6 of the 7. We're going to do the same with the other one. Give it just a little shot for extra support down the middle of the foam, down the stick. Like I said, don't be too cheap with the glue. So what we do is we just kind of add that, and we give a little bit of a hold for 1 minute. Once again, all this does is it, really presses the wood against the foam, helps it dry better, helps it stick better, because if there is a slight bubble in the foam, where it's not perfectly straight across, it has a slight bend, the stick, if it's not touching the foam, the glue's not going to work. So you don't have to press it down crazy. Just hold it down for a couple seconds, and that's basically it. So we have our foam base, and then we have the wood support going down the middle, And at this point, we're pretty much done with the gluing process. So we can take off our handy dandy glove. And you have a clean hand. It's better than trying to pick and dig that stuff all over your hand, because spray glue on your hand is very difficult. You have to peel it off and use alcohol, and I mean, it's just a mess. It's easier to use a 2-cent rubber glove and just simply peel it off, and your hand's fine. You got nothing on it. So once this is all done, all the sticks are glued, we're ready to pour coal. You could use anything you use. I mean, you're going to laugh, but I use a simple, like a plant watering can. And the reason for that is it has a small, skinny spout at the end. And the benefit to that is you have more control over where you pour the glue. I'm sorry, where you pour the rocks. So you don't have like a giant pile of rocks all over the place. You have better control. So what I do is I simply go around all 4 sides, just to make sure the sides are good. Then you go up and down the middle a couple times. And you want to give it a real nice pile. Don't be too cheap with the coal. I mean, this stuff is very, very cheap. And the benefit of this is you could do it in 2 different ways. You could make auto loads, which basically is like modern coal cars, where, you know, when they get filled, you know, they kind of move the car at a steady pace. And if you see modern coal cars now, the load on the top is very uniform. It's basically, you know, straight across the coal load. Or in the olden days, what they would do is they would fill it up and move it up and fill it up and move it up and fill it up and move it up. And if you look at a lot of older pictures of coal hoppers, they would actually have like little bumps or humps in them. And that was from moving the car up and down to fill the hopper, you know, directly from the coal mine. So you could do one or the other or both, you know, depending. If you have modern diesel and you want to have it look appropriate for the era, you just give it a straight pile up and down. Or if you're going to eventually put this in a steam era type car, you can make it with humps in it to resemble what it used to be many years ago. Or you could do both. I mean, you could mix it. There's not a reason why. It's your railroad. I look at it this way. On my railroad, I'm the guy that signs the checks, so I'm the guy that calls the shots. And likewise, for your railroad, you do the same thing. So we just give it a little look to make sure everything is nice. You have a nice even flow straight across. There's not any you know, big divots. You didn't miss any place. I usually just give it a little bit of a touch here and there, just to make sure that we have a really nice coal pile. Now, even if you do make a little bit of a boo-boo, after it dries and we trim them, I'm going to show you how you can kind of repair most of it, because none of them turn out absolutely perfect. You may have to tweak some, you know, if you see a small crack in it, or if you see a hump or a gap where you don't like it, you can fix it. So that's what it looks like once all the coal is poured. And then from here, what I do is I pour the coal on a tray that has like slats and holes in it. You don't want to spray the glue on something like this, because you're going to glue the whole thing down to your tray, and you're going to not have good luck trying to take it off. So you want to, you know, like a baker's tray or anything really that kind of has some slats or some holes. So as it dries, if there's excess glue, and there will be, the glue can either drip off the sides, or in some cases it's actually going to seep actually through the foam and come out the bottom. So you don't want to glue this on a solid thing, because it's going to be glued to your base and you're never going to get it off. So we're going to transfer this onto a rack. It's an old plastic rack that has some slats I bought from Home Depot. I don't use the shelf anymore, and I just kind of kit bashed it and just use it to make my coal loads when I do make them. So we're going to transfer this over to the other rack and get it ready for gluing. Now, when you do glue them, you could do it a number of reasons. You could just simply get an old empty spray bottle. They also have empty spray bottles at a lot of food stores, craft stores, because when you do crafts, you spray it with glue. They have it at Home Depot. They have it at Lowe's. I'm sure, depending on what part of the country, they have it at Menards, and you know how I feel about Menards products. So you can buy them in a whole different place, a bunch of places. Or what I normally use is I simply use like a weed sprayer, like a weed mister. They're pretty cheap. You can get them for like $20, and you fill up a big reservoir. You pump it up a couple times to create pressure, and all you do is just simply push the wand, and you get a fine mist that goes up and down the coal load. And it's a lot easier on the hands, the wrist, and the fingers, because you just kind of glide it up and down and make sure that glue hits everywhere instead of sitting there and doing this constantly to pump it. But if you're making a few coal loads, it's no big deal to get a spray bottle. So whichever you find easier. You could use a spray bottle. You could get like a little weed sprayer, mister, plant mister. There's a number of things you can use. All you need now, what I use in the mixture for the glue is I use regular Elmer's, like white glue, craft glue, whatever. I mix it like 50-50 with white glue and water, and I put just a little bit of dishwashing soap. Don't put gobs of dishwashing soap. I put just a little, because the oils and the materials that are in the dish soap actually help the glue. It's kind of like a silicone effect. It helps the glue go deeper into the coal load and provide more strength and better adherence. Whereas if you just spray it with glue and water, sometimes it just sits on the top unless you give it a drowning. But generally speaking, if you put a little bit of dish soap, but like I said, honestly, I don't know, depending on how many coal loads you're making, a couple teaspoons, tablespoons, whatever, but by no means like a full glass of dish soap. You don't need that much. Just a little bit will do you. So right now we're going to take these and we're going to put them over to the other rack, which is above the sink, and we're going to get them ready for spraying. Now, I have them in the sink in the basement, and I also have 2 trays at the bottom to collect the extra glue. When I'm over, I recycle the glue and pour it back into the jar for future use, and then I rinse the tray out really, really good. The reason for that is you don't want all the glue, and there will be some, not tons, but there will be some. You don't want all the glue dripping to the bottom of your basement sink or wherever you're going to do this, because then eventually it will dry. And when you're done with everything, make sure you rinse your sink with really hot water and just let the water run for a couple minutes just to make sure everything's down and out and in the sewer and long gone from your house, because you don't want to be gluing your pipes shut. But I've never had a problem. I've been doing these for 20 years and I've never had a plumbing issue. It's just when you are done, rinse your sink out with a lot of hot water and let it go down for a while to clean it all out. So let's get ready and go over and set them up to be poured, have the glue poured.